Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin. So in the last lesson, we were talking about the argument of Huduth. And I said briefly, the argument of Huduth, one of the forms of it, the argument of occurrence, is in this type of syllogism. The first mukaddima, the first premise, is the universe is changeable and alterable. The second premise is anything which is changeable and alterable is occurring, is having huduth. Therefore, which is the natija, the universe is hadith. It is occurring. So what's the difference between huduth and causality? So as per their arguments. So we have these two types of arguments that you've seen in the last couple lessons. One was the argument of causality, which was based on the principle of causality, and the other one was the argument of huduth. So a very basic difference here is in the argument of huduth, we are talking about things that occur. So we're talking about things that occur. Like we see things in contingency. We know things in contingency, in contingent existence that occur. Things exist. The world is created. While the argument of causality is more general. It's based on that general principle. So it's more reaching. It reaches more. So the general principle of causality can be applied even in conceptions. What are the causes of conceptions, ideas, different types of things? So the argument of causality is more outreaching. It reaches more areas. Whereas the argument of huduth is more restricted to we're looking at the occurrences uh in the created world, things that come to being in huduth, in creation. Okay, so now we have our seventh lesson, and this lesson will be our last lesson until after Ashura. So we're going to walk through some more of the arguments. So the claim that the atheistic claim is that there are no arguments which prove the existence of God. Well, now we're on the eighth argument today. This is the eighth argument that I'm bringing here today. So the next argument is the argument of primus mobile, prime mover. So the argument of prime mover, this is an argument that suggests that things in the universe, things in the world are in movement and motion. We look around us, things are moving. The world is spinning. The things are growing. Things are in a kind of motion. Just like if we have a ball and we go on top of a hill and we push that ball down the hill. So that ball will roll, it will move. So things are in motion. Things are being in motion here. They're in movement and growth. This movement and growth, this motion indicates that there has to be a prime mover. For things to move, they require something to push them into movement. Now notice here we're talking only about the fact of movement. So we're not talking about the existence of something being caused. We're not talking about the principle of causality. We're not talking about imkan al-wujud and wajib al-wujud. We're not talking about design, although these things can be interrelated from different aspects. But we're just looking at it from a different perspective. We're looking at now it from the perspective of, or from the aspect of motion itself. So here we can then say that that mover that moved things itself, is it something which is moving also? Meaning, is it something that is moving as well? That thing which caused the movement of all things in motion, is it something that is in motion as well? Or is it something which is unmoved, but moves other things? That has pushed things, things which are moving into movement. The first option, that is, that it would be, that is, if it is something which is moving itself, this would lead to door, endless loop, and to salso. Hence, we have to conclude that there must be a prime mover who is not moving, which has pushed things into movement. So that is the argument of prime mover. Now, an additional point on movement. When we look at something which moves, like a ball that rolls, a car that goes from one place to another, a person that moves from this place to that place, these things are in one place and not the other. They leave one place and they go to another place. They are restricted to their locality to which they are moving to. So for us to say something has motion, it is restricted to that locality of its motion in which it is currently moving towards, that is currently moving in. So this is something that we can say, that Allah does not have. Allah is not in one place and not the other. Allah is everywhere. We cannot say that Allah moves from one place to another. Why? Because this would restrict Allah. This would limit Allah. This would limit Allah to that place and then to the next place, and he would be confined to a certain locality. And this is against the notion of being absolute, infinite being. Finite things, limited things, contingent things, they are in one place and not the other. They are limited in different ways. Even if something's large, like the Earth, it's limited. The universe is limited. It's still only limited to that space that Allah has allowed it. It's limited within the confines and the extent in which Allah the Exalted has confined it, in which Allah the Exalted has created it. So this is the argument of prime mover, which says that we look around and we see that there's motion. The world is in motion, it's in movement. And since it's in movement, it has to be a mover which is not moved, which caused its movement, which pushed it into movement. The next argument that we have, so now this claim that the atheist had, that there is no arguments which prove the existence of God. Okay, we went through 8 of them. Now we're on the 9th of them. The 9th argument is the argument of intrinsic nature, or fitra. Now, we have fitra arguments based on Quranic text and hadith, and then try to understand some special things we know about fitra, for that we try to understand some things about fitra which we find in the hadith, which are reliable, and the ayats of the Quran. But here, looking at, it's another way to look at fitra, is we look at it from a kind of intellectual perspective, and that is the argument of intrinsic nature. That us people, we have this kind of intrinsic inclinations in us, intrinsic nature in us, which is certain to us, which is obvious to us. Although we may clutter it up, cloud it up, and unattention to it due to some different factors. So the argument of intrinsic nature or fitra. Intrinsic inclination is defined by some scholars. So some scholars define this as it is an innate, embedded awareness of Allah the Exalted. That's what fitra is. An innate, embedded awareness of Allah the Exalted. Some have defined it as a new and unprecedented creation. So there some, maybe they describe it differently. This intrinsic nature or inclination in the self, embedded in the self of us, allows us to be aware of Allah the Exalted. So fitra is an intrinsic guidance for mankind. What do I mean? Okay, if we want to look at hidayah, guidance, we could divide guidance into two types. We have al-hidayah takwiniyah and al-hidayah tashri'iyah. Al-hidayah tashri'iyah is what we're very familiar with, is when Allah the Exalted sends books, prophets for the guidance of his creatures. The al-hidayah takwiniyah, this is the natural guidance. It's the naturally programmed guidance. It means Allah Allah has created some things in us which are kind of like programmed in us. This is the hidayah takwiniyah. So guidance is of two types, takwiniyah type and tashri'iyah type. One is the type that Allah has put in our creation, and the other type is the type which Allah sends, and we have to use our ikhtiyar to follow it, use our faculties and what Allah has given us to make the right choices and follow that guidance. Another term that we should know is ghariza. This is instinct. Fitra also is an intrinsic, like fitra also is intrinsic like ghariza, like instinct, but it is said by some that it pertains to rational types of guidance. So when we're talking about fitra, we're talking about something that pertains to some types of rational types of guidance. And ghariza pertains to non-rational types of guidance. Animals and humans share in common the features of ghariza, instinct. So like to want food, to have these kinds of instincts. So there's a difference. Some are pertaining to, desire-like things, and others, the fitra is pertaining to rational types of guidance. So the first thing is fitra is part of human creation. So some things about fitra before we go and look at some arguments for it. The first thing is fitra is part of human creation, but not outside of the system of cause and effect. So because of that, hence, external factors can influence its growth and development of this fitra, its flourishment. One can commit so many sins that their fitra becomes buried and they forget all about Allah the Exalted. Inattentive, like they're sleepwalking, heedless of Allah the Exalted. Because they have buried this fitra. So they could be ghafil, they could become ghafil, they could be forgetful, heedless about Allah the Exalted, until something comes which shakes them and wakes them up to realize what they know deep inside their souls, that Allah exists. The second thing is this fitra is an intuitive, innate knowledge or awareness that mankind has. However, it can also be known through acquired knowledge. So in logic, we have ilmu baddihi and ilmu nazari. Ilmu baddihi is something that doesn't require thought process to which sometimes happens so fast you don't even realize it. But you have thought process, things that you know through thought process, and then you have things which you know obviously without any thought process. Like I know I exist. I know my I-ness. This is without any thought process. So even though this fitra is innate knowledge and awareness that mankind has, it can also be known through acquired knowledge. So if something that maybe we become unattentive to, we can reflect on it with some acquired knowledge and we could learn about it. We could think on it. Third thing about fitra is it cannot be separated from rational perception and knowledge. So it's not something that is opposing it, not something that can be separated from it. The fourth thing is it is a means by which the humans can be held higher than other creatures. The fifth is it is general and universal, kulli, not juzi, not particular, it's kulli, universal. The sixth thing is it is permanent and inalterable, cannot be altered. Allah has made it in us and it's fixed in us. So let's look at some of there's different ways that they could go about arguing for this this fitra. So there's two arguments that I brought here. So the first argument for fitra, the human is intrinsically inclined to Allah the Exalted. So how can we say that from our intrinsic nature? The first is love for absolute perfection. The human being loves perfection and inclines and wants perfection in an absolute sense. She wants perfection. When observing others, one will find that other humans also have similar inclinations. They want perfection. That is, that they have a love, an inclination in themselves for perfection. So maybe sometimes we don't have the right perfection in view, but they have an inclination for it. The existence of such a desire, an inclination in the human soul, indicates to us that there is a proof for the reality of the absolute perfection. And Allah is the absolute perfection. Nothing can even be compared to Allah the Exalted. Nothing is like Allah the Exalted. And He has no limitations, no defects. So this fact that we are inclined towards perfection and there's absolute perfection indicates to us that we are inclined towards the most perfect being, and that is Allah the Exalted. So intrinsic and instinctive inclinations without any existence externally is not in agreement with the order of the universe and observation of humans and animals in regards to their gariza. It indicates to us that they are attached and give attention to real things. Humans give attention to real things. Hence, one can say that humans initially and innately have a love, have an inclination towards Allah the Exalted. But it is possible that mistakes occur in the object of absolute love. One may find something, create it, and take it in the place of the absolute perfection, thereby not reaching the innate inclination of the absolute perfect. The second argument is in moments and events of fear and danger, when the human being lacks hope in any created means or causes, deep within his or her very self, they would feel that there is a power who has the power over creation. And if it wills, it can save him or her. So they call out from the depth of themselves to that exalted being, as if they are a sailor on a ship. And they were in the sea, and a storm approached, and their ship became shipwrecked. And the sailor, he's holding on to a plank of wood, his fingers slipping away. And deep inside his very self, he would feel a need to call out to the only one who can help him. He would call out to a being who that hope is in to save him. This is a proof for the belief in that God, Allah, embedded in our very selves, this innate inclination. Yet we go heedless to it. We go ghafil. We go unattentive. A heedless person just needs a little shaking to wake him or her up. They will realize what they were heedless from. The sins and the dunya love are like burying this innate torch inside of us. Or you could imagine it as if it were a window to a car, and you get all this mud and slime and pollution on the mirror of the car, the window. Here, this light of fitra gets buried, and we become heedless, unaware, until we face something that wakes us up, something that ignites the flame within us of awareness, and we wake up. So when we face crises sometimes, when we face tests and trials, we may wake up. Therefore, it can be argued that the very hope for the higher power in such instances is proof of the existence of the all-powerful being. So these are two arguments for fitra. One is that humans love absolute perfection. Humans love perfection. They're inclined towards it. Hence, you could argue that they're in love with Allah in a way, because they're seeking that absolute perfection. And Allah the Exalted is the absolute perfect. Nothing at all is like Allah the Exalted. Allah has no defect. The second is that in moments of events of fear and danger, we call out with hope to a higher being. And that proves that deep inside ourselves, we are aware and inclined to Allah the Exalted. Here now we finished now our section of a refutation of the claim that there is no arguments that prove the existence of God. As we presented in the last several examples, we've been through 7 lessons, that the claim there is no argument which proves the existence of God is a false claim. Rather, what the atheists attempted to do sometimes is critique arguments, in which we can critique their critiques. Hence, there are many arguments, as you've seen, that prove the existence of God. If we want to put it into a kind of way, like a logical way to think about it, we can say, Premise 1. There is no arguments which prove the existence of God. Premise 2. But there are many arguments that prove the existence of God. Therefore, the first premise here is false. And its opposite is true. That there are arguments which prove the existence of God. So this claim of atheists that there are no arguments which prove the existence of God is false. It's a false claim. So if any atheist comes and claims that, then it's a false claim. Now, maybe they'll be more clever and they'll just critique the arguments. Now we have to address their critiques at different levels and see what we could do in face of whatever they have to whatever they have to bring. So that is everything for our lesson. We will meet again inshallah after Ashura. Wa akhiru dawana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.